Hey folks, you're listening to episode 14 of the Deeply Devoted Podcast, a ministry of the E-Free Church of Bemidji, Minnesota. My name is Eric Nygren. I'm one of the pastors on staff here at E-Free Bemidji. And with me today in the Deeply Devoted Podcast studio is someone who makes our pastors and our musicians, our worship service volunteers, he makes us look and sound good on Sunday mornings. And of course, I am talking about the one, the only, Dan Evans. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, no.
Well, we got to try out some sound effects on this one here too, Dan.
What have I gotten myself into?
It's the high-tech show here, right? Well, this is going to be one of our Testimony Tuesday episodes. Again, we drop an episode every Tuesday, and we're getting this one recorded just in the nick of time. This will post in about 48 hours, something like that. Dan and I are recording after a busy Sunday morning, a successful Sunday morning here, first Sunday of December, and we're getting into the Christmas season. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the Christmas stuff and get ready for the season here. But if my voice sounds a little bit hoarse today, it wasn't because I didn't preach this morning. I didn't do a lot of speaking. It's because I was yelling at my TV yesterday quite a bit and texting back and forth with Dan. I had every plan to have Dan come on this podcast so that I could give him the business a little bit about a certain team up north that lost to my beloved Ohio State Buckeyes. But I can't even believe I'm going to say it. But the Buckeyes did not do very well at all yesterday, did they, Dan?
I'd like to say no. I think you're correct there. In fact, I've got just a little something for you. Let's see. What is that? Oh, I think that's
the sound of torture.
That's the Michigan fight song.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
I'm sorry.
For most people that don't know or don't care about the history of Ohio State and Michigan football, this was the Thanksgiving weekend's always the big weekend. And there was a streak going for a long time where Ohio State just took care of Michigan every year.
It was rough.
Unfortunately, the last 4 years, it's gone the other way. And this was going to be the year. I think even Dan knew that this was going to be the year.
I was ready to come in here this morning and just, bow my head, say, yep, I knew it was coming. And yesterday turned the completely opposite way. Yeah. Nobody was expecting it. So
Dan was very kind to wear his golden blue, Mason blue today, and among other things we won't speak of to rub it in a little bit. But
hey, that's Carissa's fault. Just remember that. All right.
Well, Dan, either way, I still am glad to get you on the podcast here. We're going to get to know you a little bit as our AV supervisor and member of our church family. But it is Christmas time. And we are just getting into this holiday season here a little bit. How about a little, let's see, do I have some Christmas music there?
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah. So, Dan, I want you to kind of set the mood for us here a little bit. I'm going to call this our Christmas lightning round.
All right.
Dan, what is your favorite Christmas movie?
Got to go with the classic, A Christmas Story.
Okay. The old... I think it came out in 1983 is what I'm thinking. Yeah. I won't tell you that I remember seeing that in the theater, but well, let's move on from there. Dan, favorite Christmas carol?
Coventry Carol. It's not a super popular one, but yeah, that one always gets stuck in my head.
All right. How about this one, Dan? Everyone has one of these. No one wants to admit it. But your favorite guilty pleasure Christmas song, and by that I mean the song that you might be a little embarrassed to admit that you like, but when you hear it, especially when you're in your car by yourself, you're singing along.
Well, she started thawing out in around June, and her name is Mariah Carey.
No.
And, it's all I want for Christmas is you.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Admittedly?
Admittedly.
Okay.
In the workplace, I will randomly, all of a sudden, just turn it up on the speakers, and pretty sure all my coworkers come after me at that point.
Okay. Now, Dan, you've got kids. You've got 2.
I got 2 with one coming at the end of
One on the
January.
way.
Yep.
But Dan, I know, is a big kid. And so I want to know, is there a gift that you're going to buy, quote unquote, for your kids? But really, Dan, we know it's for you.
Oh, anything Lego.
Anything Lego.
Lego.
So if people wanted to find like your Lego wish list here, what would be on your Christmas Lego wish list?
Anything Star Wars, of course.
Okay.
But you can literally get anything Lego-wise, and we will build it, and it'll most likely be me, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a father kid building.
It's a bonding moment.
Yeah, that's a bonding moment.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Even though you'll probably do
Details.
99%
Well,
of it. Yeah.
Bentley and Nikolai definitely,
Yeah.
help 90% of the time.
Okay. All right. How about best holiday coffee shop beverage? The menu changes usually like right after Halloween. What is your go-to holiday coffee shop beverage, Dan?
Oh, it's got to be just a normal hot chocolate or even a peppermint hot chocolate.
Okay. You go for the peppermint this time of year?
I do.
All right. Is there one in town that you gravitate toward more, or just wherever you're at?
It's really wherever. Yep.
Okay. All right. And then lastly, I think this is an important question. This is a get to know you question. Dan, what is the one toy that you never got for Christmas as a kid, but you still kind of want?
Oh gosh. I had to think about this for a little bit because Carissa and I were talking about this the other day when we were watching the Santa Claus, and he got his little weenie whistle at the end of the movie, right?
Right.
And
yeah, Dan, what is your weenie whistle?
I was thinking those soccer boppers, right? Remember those blow up like punching like things for your hands? That was like the one thing, and I asked my mom about it the other day. She goes, "Yeah, you were going to punch your sister," so we said no.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's what it was.
Okay. Well, maybe we can look on eBay and see if somebody still has one.
Yeah, Dad said he was going to look. He said at this point it'd be allowed.
Okay.
But,
all
we'll
right.
see.
You've been allowed out of probation. You can actually get it. Mine was I always wanted the Star Wars AT-AT. It was a big, one of the big ones. Either that or G.I. Joe made an aircraft carrier. It was like 7 feet long. And at the time, I don't know how much it cost, but it was more than my folks were ever going to spend, for a toy on. But it was the one kid that you knew that actually had the 7-foot G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, and never got it. So
yeah, I get that.
That's all right. We live to fight another day. But all right. Well, Dan, let's get a little more serious here and kind of get to know you on this episode. Dan, how long have you lived in the Bemidji area? Tell us a little bit about what brought you to this part of the state.
Yeah, so I have lived back in Bemidji for just over 8 years now, which is actually the longest I've lived anywhere, which is kind of crazy. And my wife actually brought me back to the area when we were first dating. So I was up in Warroad, she was here, and I decided, I think this is where life is going, so I came down this way. So
most of us moved north to Bemidji. You moved south.
I did.
To Bemidji.
Yep.
You're one of the few.
I left pretty much Canada to come
I was
here.
going to say, you have the few that doesn't have Canadian citizenship that moved down to Bemidji. All right. Dan, tell us a little bit about how would you describe maybe the pathway your faith has taken over the years, and if you wouldn't mind, kind of just sharing a little bit of your story about how you came to faith in Christ.
Yeah, so, throughout the years, I went to multiple VBSs. As a kid, we went to church every so often. We never really had a normal, church family or anything like that, regular church. But, like I said, went to VBS, did all that, went Easter, Christmas, kind of all the normal stuff. And then I remember giving my life to Christ back, it was sometime late elementary school. I think if I remember right, down in Texas. I remember that VBS, they had chocolate-covered grasshoppers and cockroaches and stuff that the leaders ate. And that just sticks in my mind because it was just so outrageous. But, yeah, what a good time. But my faith really started to grow when we moved to Illinois. And we started going to a church called Harvest Time Bible Church. And our youth pastor there, funny enough, was also called PJ, similar to here.
Okay, so it wasn't much of a change.
Nope, not much of a change at all when you started coming here. And then we found out that the youth pastor here was PJ, so that was funny enough. But yeah, and really kind of dug in there. Started doing, Sunday school, youth group. Actually joined a tech team on Wednesday nights, so they did their their youth groups on Sunday nights. And so Wednesday nights was different activities for the high school and middle school, whether they wanted to help with Awanas or, we had a drama team, a tech team, a volunteer team, kind of all sorts of different stuff. And so I did the tech team and so got to learn a few different things there, but also did missions trips, did conferences, all sorts of different church activities, but that's really where my faith really started to grow. So
if I'm following the map here a little bit, you mentioned Texas, you mentioned Illinois, you're wearing a Michigan sweatshirt, and we're here in Minnesota. Dan, have you lived in a few different places over the course of your life?
Yep, born in Michigan. Actually lived in Michigan, 2 different areas, twice, and then lived in Iowa. Kansas, Georgia, Texas, Illinois, Minnesota, and North Dakota.
Okay, so somebody needs to keep count because at some point we're going to have some kind of staff trivia question, and you're going to want to know all the states where Dan has lived or how many he's lived in. Yeah.
Yep. And all those except North Dakota was before I graduated high school.
Oh man!
So
well,
yeah, it was a challenge.
And now 8 years you've got some semi-permanent residence here.
And every 2-3 years, Carissa gets really annoyed with me because I kind of get that itch for like a big change, just because I'm so used to it. And she goes, "No, Dan, you are stuck here."
No, let's keep you here. We're glad you're here, so we don't want you going anywhere anytime soon.
Oh, I don't want to.
All right. Well, Dan, this might be a little bit more of a serious question, but just what are some maybe of the challenges that you've faced over the years that have not only shaped who you are, but you'd say have shaped your faith as well, and just even how have you seen spiritual growth in your life through those things?
So high school and college definitely had some friends who weren't, believers, and, hung out with them probably, I won't say more than I should have, but probably listened to them more than I should have. And that really kind of put me into a season of kind of questioning and doubting, some things, not only of myself, but with God. Why does he let certain things happen, the purpose of stuff, kind of the whole 9 yards.
Right.
But I'm super thankful that only lasted for a very brief amount of time. He brought me on the right path and it kind of got me back in the straight and narrow. But the other thing that I've struggled with has really been, anxiety, depression, and, what that's been like and how to handle it and where to go with it. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've been super grateful is, having those resources in God's Word to know where to dig into and where to go when I'm having those moments of feeling anxious or, that you feel that quote unquote darkness, coming in,
right?
Where you can go to the scripture and, have that hope and that knowledge that, no, this is such a little thing in the grand scheme of things. God's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think that's an important thing. It's not just looking to the scriptures for a little bit of a pick-me-up encouragement, but really, as you just said, where you find hope, genuine hope, which doesn't always just, smooth it all over and everything's happy and you move on, but it returns you back to what's really important, what really matters. So
Well, and I know years ago that wouldn't have been the case, I would have just, okay, gone to video games or gone and hung out with friends to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
And instead it's, you turn to the gospel instead.
Looking for something else to kind of fill that void. Yeah. Well, Dan, in addition to your role here at our church, which I'm sure for you feels like a full-time job. We tap Dan pretty hard in his role here, but believe it or not, Dan actually has a full-time job in the community. So you work out there as well. And, just kind of thinking about this, and I need to be reminded of this often because, as a pastor, I live and work in the spiritual world of things. Everybody else, normal people, don't. And so it's not always easy to bring our faith into our workplace. That being said, though, Dan, what are some ways you think that we as Christians can be more intentional about living out our faith and even sharing the gospel with those outside our church?
The first thing that comes to mind is living a life that reflects Christ's love, humility, grace in our interactions, and leading by example, right? Showing that kindness, the compassion to others, building genuine relationships so that you can build trust to create spaces to have conversations about our faith with others. We can use our God-given gifts each day, whether that's through teaching, creating, leading, helping. But we need to be active in our community to really show this as well. One thing that our church does amazingly well is our global partners, and, that's fantastic. But, there's so much more that we can do within our community, and hopefully we can do that more this coming year.
Yeah. Dan was a member of our strategic leadership team, and we had many conversations on that team about bringing the gospel, bringing the hope of the gospel outside of this building to our community, and not just being nice neighbors and doing good deeds in Bemidji. It's important as that is to love our neighbor in tangible ways, but to be more intentional about reaching the community. And I remember some of those conversations, Dan, and just some of your input there about we need to be doing that, and that's a key part of where we need to be as a church. So not only that, so you full-time job, you've working as our AV supervisor here. As I mentioned earlier, you're also a parent. You and Carissa have a growing family. As a parent of young children who are quite literally sometimes running around our church, which is good.
All the time.
We like that.
It's chaos, 24/7.
I'd rather have that. I always like getting a fist bump from your kiddos, and it's fun to kind of see that familiar face here. But Dan, how are you and Carissa thinking about the ways that you disciple your kids, and what role do you play? What role do you think you play as a discipler, as a parent, versus the role that the church family plays as a discipler?
Well, Carissa and I talked, and we actually decided that's Amy's job as the kids' bin director.
So, right. We outsource it.
Yep. And we just say, here you go, Amy. Sunday mornings, this is you. Here we go.
Right.
No.
If it were only that easy. Yeah.
Just here. You get an hour, go for it. No, we, the biggest thing is, we show them that the focus is on Jesus. We guide them to him. We not only feed their spiritual growth by, reading them the Bible each night before they go to bed, but we also want to feed our spiritual growth by, making sure that we're getting that so that we can continue giving that to them. We pray for them and with them, and having them be involved in the Kidsmen activities here, whether that's Kids Club, the performance coming up next week for Sunday. I know Bentley's super excited for that. The Kidsmen activities here are just so amazing, and the church family is phenomenal. There's really no other way to put it, because each one of us has a strength that somebody else doesn't have. And so I know there's stuff that Carissa and I can't give our kids.
Yes.
but that Amy or you or, somebody else has that they're going to get that's going to help grow and disciple them.
Yeah.
And that's such a blessing. And that's the reason that I love seeing that our kids get excited to come to church each week.
Yeah.
And that right there makes me excited because they're always, are we going to church today? It's like, yeah. And they're like, oh, yes.
What a difference that makes when and not everybody has that luxury. And, as your kids get older, that may change where kids don't really want to come on Sunday or Wednesday night. And, I went through a phase of that myself and things like that. So it's not unusual. But while you've got it, what a great thing. Yeah, and it makes me think, Dan, I remember, I don't even know how many years ago it was, but whether it was one of your kiddos, but like we did a child dedication. Maybe we've done for both of them, but I think I did one of them. And
you did.
I always think of that in the sense of, that is what the church family is saying when we say, yes, here are these parents and they're going to raise this child, these children. We're going to play our part in the discipleship role. We're not just going to pray for them as parents and hope that they do a good job. We're going to be the Sunday school teachers and the VBS volunteers and the youth group leaders and the, whatever, just even helping once in a while. Yeah. Helping with the kids' Christmas program. I mean, it all goes back to that. And just the way you said that, I think that's exactly right. It's the body of Christ. Somebody else contributes something to my family that I can't because I don't have all the spiritual gifts. And that's why we're part of a church family. So, yeah. And that's not all Dan does. Because even on Wednesday nights, somehow I talked Dan, at least a couple of years ago, into leading a life group.
3 years now.
Yeah, has it been that long?
It's been that long.
And you've not quit or run away screaming. No, I'm thankful for all of our life group leaders and hosts. Dan, you lead one of the Wednesday night life groups, one of the ones that meet here at the church. So we have two groups that meet here while kiddos and students are in kids club and youth groups. Some of the parents hang around, and so even others that aren't parents and don't have kids. Dan, what have you seen over these 3 years of leading a life group? What have you seen God do through life groups?
So how I was saying, the church family and everything? Mm-hmm. It's those connections and building that church family. Yeah. So our group, we can have anywhere from 4 people on a Wednesday night when we've had up to 18 before.
It's a full room. Yeah.
It's insane. It's crazy. We all go off on tangents, but we love it.
Yeah.
Because we have literally become our own little family.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Each person has got a different walk and history with their walk with Christ and are at different stages in their spiritual walk. So when you provide us with a question, and we have our own inside joke of at the end of a question when you say explain, we all joke. It's like, all right, you got to actually say what you mean now. And
you can't just give the answer.
Sometimes we add it to it and we go explain.
Yeah.
But, having that variety allows us to see so many different viewpoints that not everybody sees.
Yeah.
Right? And so we are so thankful for that. And some of us who just kind of sit back and, being that quote unquote facilitator of the group, I just kind of sit there some weeks and just read the question and then just sit and just listen.
Yeah.
Because there's some people who have such great thoughts, and then somebody will just say one thing and everybody goes, huh. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then somebody will say something and go, well, actually.
Yeah.
And so it's a really cool, unique experience. So if you're not part of a life group, join one.
Thank you for that commercial, Dan. Yeah.
But yeah, it's truly the best thing that I've seen is that connection and seeing how people have really come together from it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So
I feel like I say this all the time. But when I look at life groups, again, if I say, Dan, Tell me about the questions from 4 weeks ago.
Don't know.
Yeah. We have to think about, okay, we were probably still in Luke chapter 1.
Yep, I'll give you a rough idea.
Yeah, right. And that's not to undermine the questions or the discussion.
Not at all.
But if I said, tell me about some of the conversations you've had in your group, or tell me about how you've prayed for one another in your group over the last 4 weeks, or, tell me about a conversation that happened outside of life group that is a direct result of being in the life group. I'm sure that you could think of.
I can tell you instantly.
Yeah. And so that's the beauty of these things. And so it does. And we are growing spiritually. And we're not just growing spiritually from the sermon. I love just how you say that it's somebody brings an insight that the rest of the group goes, oh, I didn't see that there. And you did.
Yep.
And it is a joy to just kind of sit back and, as you said, be a facilitator. So thanks for doing that. We try not to have Dan here every night of the week.
Do you though?
But sometimes it happens, and sometimes Dan and I see each other here most every night of the week. But
I'm pretty sure I have a bedroom somewhere up in the attic.
We can work on that, Dan. We can find you a nice, comfortable spot. I always say there's a nice, comfy couch in the youth room, in the 511 room, that you could just kind of sack out on and grab an hour or two of sleep and get back to it. But Dan and I are also always obviously talking about technology all the time, not just in his job context, but that's usually the starter there. So we're kind of fellow techies here. Some of the ways we'd like to talk about this is just how churches can use technology for the sake of discipleship. Now, you can go the other direction, and Dan was even talking about putting in a fog machine this morning, so I hopefully not seriously. But, in all seriousness, sometimes the technology can be the thing, the big flashy thing. Let's get the new thing and see what it can do for us.
Yeah.
And we don't use it as a tool. Dan, how do you think churches can use technology well without getting so focused on the latest and greatest, or we're not putting on a show, but how do we use technology well?
So, there's a ton of different ways churches use tech, right? We create websites, apps, social media, Bible studies, live stream services, podcasts. What are we doing right now?
Right.
Videos, prayer chains, text messages. There's so many different things, right? But it is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Mm-hmm. You talk about it not putting on a show and not having the latest and greatest, but technology moves really quick.
Yes, it does.
Right? And so it might feel like we just did something, but surprise, it's actually already out of date. We'll talk about our projectors, for instance, right? Our front projectors are 13 years old, but yet there's people who are like, oh, I swear we just installed those. It does feel that way. Yeah, you're right. 13 years ago, it does kind of feel like yesterday.
And spend a lot of money doing it. Yeah, right.
Also, after 2020 and COVID, 4 years feels like a snap of a finger. I still don't know where the past 4 years have gone.
No kidding.
But with tech, it kind of forces our hand to upgrade, sometimes, right? And so one thing I keep in the back of my mind in my role is, does the equipment work? Is it causing issues that'll affect not only our other equipment, but how people are worshiping, right? Is it going to affect our online, folks who aren't able to come in?
Right.
And, a lot of people, always say, we need to focus on the people who are here in person. And I totally get that, right? But I also have to think about that person who's struggling and can't get in that day.
Right.
I want them to have a best experience that they can sitting at home.
Right.
Whether they're going through something or medically they can't be here or the weather's stopping them or maybe they're out of town and they still want to feel connected to us. I want them to have as good of experience as possible. And sometimes we need to have technology that might feel like it's above and beyond.
Yeah, extravagant or more than we need. Yeah,
Yep.
Yep.
but it actually is going to help. And so it's tough. And, sometimes it's technology that's going to put us in a better position for the future, you know?
Right.
And obviously, like I said, there's going to be some things that, people are going to view differently. Some things that people are going to feel like we're putting on a show for, but we're really not.
Right.
Everybody's going to have their own personal opinion on it. But, I think we should probably get a fog machine,
Well,
could you imagine Pastor Jerry coming out from one of the closets? I mean, it would be like this whole Darth Vader scene.
Yeah, lasers and fog machine. We could really do it up. Yeah. That would be, I mean, it would be something, Dan. I'm not sure what it would be, but it would be something.
No, there is no need for a fog machine. I'm totally joking.
And, it is easy to go, look, in the first century, in New Testament times, did they have this kind of stuff?
Absolutely not.
No. Not for most of church history did they have anything like this. And we were just talking earlier with Matt Graff about overhead slide projectors and how revolutionary that was and things like that. And yes, we know we've got brothers and sisters in the Lord across the world who have zero technology. And so we need to hold it in its proper place. But yes, as you said, boy, just even over the last 4 years,
it's changed dramatically.
It's amazing what it's done. So Dan, I can't promise this now.
Oh boy.
But if you had $100,000 to spend on technology at our church, how would you spend it?
Obviously, a fog machine.
Obviously, a fog machine.
We got to get Jerry, a Darth Vader suit, get him walking out onto the stage.
Okay.
Just think of the YouTube views.
Okay, that may be true.
No, we've been working on this whole tech upgrade, right? So we've done quite a few updates already, right?
Yeah.
We've gotten new handheld microphones. We've gotten a new projector for the back wall, which is awesome. We've updated our camera controller in the live stream room. We're getting some sound panels. That's slowly but surely going.
Eventually,
unfortunately, the company that we're working with is from Florida, and they were kind of hit by the hurricanes, so they're slowly but surely getting back on their feet. And there's a little bit of a delay there, but our first world problems with sound is definitely not as bad as theirs after a hurricane. But, the few things that come to mind, are continuing with this, updating our front projectors. Again, like I said, they're 13 years old. That is ancient in the days of technology. We are really lucky that those are still working.
Yeah.
Doing a full set of sound panels in the sanctuary, I mean, that in and of itself could cost $100,000, which is amazing, saying it like that. Putting up new speakers in the Connection Cafe. There are more and more people sitting out there with their kids, updating that TV. Getting an in-ear system for the worship team. That would be fantastic. And for those of you who don't know what an in-ear system is, it's, little headphones that go in their ears. We get rid of the floor wedges that put sound into the room. So we take more sound out of the sanctuary, and then we can put, a click track in there so they can stay on beat and do all sorts of different cool things. And I mean, even just with those few things, we could easily go over $100,000. So it's amazing how quickly money goes with technology.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of one handheld microphone that Jason uses for, service on Sunday, that's $1,000 right there. Yeah. So,
but it does enhance, and again, to be clear, does it help us to worship better? I don't, I think an argument could be made. No, I don't think it in itself does. And yet it does serve its purpose. It's a tool. It's a tool like anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
It's gonna, you got to think of it as, you think people with hearing issues, right? That microphone is going to help them be able to hear God's
and
word,
engage.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
That live stream camera is going to help that person be able to hear from home. I mean, there's so many different things that you got to think of. And, there's some things where, people will say I'm a little narrow-minded when it comes to that technology because that is my role. But, I mean, there's also pros to that.
Yeah.
It's just something I think of every day for all that.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked a lot about the equipment, and the equipment is essential. You've got to have good equipment to do what you need to do, whether it's sound or projection or live stream. And as you've said, those things have grown in complexity over the last number of years. And as you can attest to, this is not a one-person job.
It's impossible.
It's impossible to. I mean, there's literally multiple stations to be able to do this. So, Dan, I want you to talk for a minute about the team of volunteers that you serve with each week. And how do you see those members of the body working together to bless the congregation?
So I know other people are going to fight me on this, but I really do have the best volunteers in our church. I'm not going to lie. I have 24 people in my group. I was looking last night on Planning Center. How awesome is that? And each one of us has a different gift, right? There's some of us that only like to do projection, some of us that only like to do sound, some of us that only want to do live stream. We've got a few learning to do different spots right now. We've got a few new people who are coming in, which is fantastic. And these folks are the quote-unquote secret sauce to the services, right?
Right.
I mean, without them, services wouldn't happen. I mean, they would, but we would have issues.
Well, we almost did that the other day when we had some tech issues.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, and not that it was about any of the people, it was about the equipment.
Nope. Yep.
But, boy, you take it out of the equation, and it's rough.
Yeah. I had to really start going through what was going on that day. But there's so many behind-the-scenes things that these folks do that just really is outstanding. And if you see one of them, just thank them.
Yeah.
They don't get enough thanks each week. Because, if you think of it, if the person who's on projection isn't on the right spot, you're not going to know what words to sing. Jerry's going to be on the wrong slide. You're going to be confused with what he's saying in his sermon. If the sound tech doesn't have the right mix, our ears are going to hurt.
Yeah.
If the live stream cameras aren't focused on something, it's somebody at home isn't going to be focused on the actual service. Especially at home, there's so many other things to be focused on.
Yes.
So, each spot is so important. So it's quite a thing to do.
So you said 24 volunteers is where you're at?
24, yeah.
Now, let's say somebody wanted to be the 25th member of the team.
I like that
25th, 26th, let's round up to 30, something like that. If somebody wanted to join your ministry team, Dan, what could they do? And I think this is the better follow-up. How much tech experience do they really need? Because I think some people look at it and go, if I'm on the AV team, the tech team, I'm not really all that techie. I can barely get my smart TV to work or my smartphone to work. Does Dan really want me on his team? How could you use others on that ministry team?
Come talk to me. We can see what talent you have and get you put in. You don't have to be super techie to get started.
Yeah.
I am more than happy to teach you.
Yeah.
We have got some fantastic other volunteers, that can help teach. Because, I'm only one person, and there's a few people who've been doing it longer than I have, right?
Yeah.
So, we say I've got 24 people. That's not a lot. Funny enough, right? Each Sunday, I need 7 different people.
Right.
Between the two services. Right?
Right.
So, I do need more people, like everybody else, right? I need more volunteers. Come talk to me, hey. But, you just need a willingness to learn, a heart to serve our congregation and the Lord, and, we'll get you put in and in a spot. The soundboard looks intimidating.
It does.
It does. I completely agree. And there are days when something will go wrong, and you look at it and go, I don't even know where to start. Mm-hmm. That was us the other day, right? Mm-hmm. When we had no, high sound in the sanctuary and everything sounded super bassy. That's when you just start troubleshooting, and we're there. We figure it out, and, it's the soundboard actually isn't all that complicated.
Yeah.
So, and, slides on the, computer. is not that complicated.
Yeah.
Live stream a little bit more because you're doing sound and cameras, but it's as you get used to it, it's really not that bad. Or there's, our Connection Cafe in the second service. You sit out there with an iPad and just adjust the volume up and down and just make sure you can hear things,
Right.
So, I mean, there's multiple different ways. And even if you wanted to say, hey, I can help tear down, set up, what can I do with that? Oh, man, I would love you forever.
Yeah, just to plug in microphone cables and get
be
things
my best
ready.
Friend.
Yeah. Being the kind of the roadie on Sunday morning. Absolutely. Yeah, and it makes me think, Dan, just of, and we highlighted it a lot during kind of the 100th anniversary, our 4 Gs, gather, grow, give, and go. I mean, this is an example of give.
Yeah.
Not necessarily financial giving, but giving through serving.
Yep.
And, using technology. I don't know if it's a spiritual gift. I don't know if there's a tech spiritual gift or not, an aptitude toward it. But the things you're talking about really are skills that can be learned.
Absolutely.
And, if you're someone that says, look, I'm there on a Sunday morning anyway, once a month I could help serve or come to a Thursday night worship team practice or something like that and help everything from put words into lyric slides to, setting up equipment to,
Yep.
I'm sure there's all kinds of things. If you're looking for just a good way to serve and you haven't found that yet, I think Dan's team would be a fun opportunity to find a way to help. Yeah.
Absolutely, It would be.
Yeah. Man, I think there's plenty of other things that we could talk about, Dan, but...
You want to go back to Michigan, Ohio State?
I really don't.
Sure?
Maybe a year from now. Maybe I don't a year from now.
I was going to
Who
say,
knows?
when we go 5-0?
All right. I'm glad Dan.
I might live to regret that.
I'm glad
one.
Dan is a good friend that we can bother each other in good humility here. But Dan, one of the things that I've been doing on these podcasts, and what did I say? We're up to episode 14.
Yeah.
So you're 14. At the end of every episode, I like to ask whoever's on the podcast this week this question about being deeply devoted to Jesus. We talk all the time about becoming deeply devoted followers of Jesus together. And so, Dan, my question for you is what's one thing that you've been blessed by lately that is deepening your devotion to Jesus?
So for me, it was the 100-year celebration.
Okay.
Right?
Even though we made you do all that work.
I don't remember that weekend very much, but yeah. No. How fun was that?
Yeah.
I mean, truly. So seeing what our little church started as to where we are now,
Yeah.
All the challenges it went through, the celebrations, that devotion, that, these folks had throughout the years to keep it going. And, it was outstanding. Seeing and getting to meet all the different people, I've heard about, throughout the years that I've been here as, at the church and, getting to meet Fred and Berta and, all the other folks who came into town, and all that, who really have had an impact on others in their walk with Christ. It challenged me really to continue to serve and support our church family even more, right? I feel like that in and of itself is being, that part of being deeply devoted to Jesus, right? That serving.
Yeah.
Part of that 4 Gs. And using the gifts that he's giving me. Like you were just saying, is that technology, a gift? Is it something learned? To me, I think it's a little bit of both, right?
Right.
Because, there's...
Just the way not pun not intended, but the way God's wired us.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are some things that you can try and teach me and, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
But there are some things that I will do and, I picked it up pretty quick. So, I think tech is kind of one of those things. So if I can serve and, be as devoted as possible to helping others continue to grow in their faith and helping this church grow and reach out to our community and just, give, that's huge for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Dan, I do appreciate that about you, that servant's heart. maybe sometimes I get you into trouble, and that's why you're here.
Don't ask Carissa.
80 hours a week or something like that. One of my funny memories, though, of Dan and his servant-heartedness is one Sunday I walk in, and it's the prelude, I think, at the second service, and Dan is singing.
That's right.
Now, I know Dan can sing. That's not, I'm not calling his ability to sing into question, but Dan doesn't serve on our worship team. He's on the other end.
There's a reason.
And Dan is singing. He's got a microphone in hand, and he's just filling in. And I checked my order of worship to just see if I missed Dan's name on it. And no, it wasn't there. He just jumped in and said, I'll do it.
Yep.
And
people were sick, and it was just Jason. And I had filled in Thursday night, and he goes, hey, you want to do it? And I said, oh, okay.
Yeah. So, Dan, thanks for just that willingness to serve like that. And this is fun to be able to do this. Dan even helped me out when we started this podcast. And I guess it would have been episode 0 because we did kind of a test. I don't know if you remember that. And that was one of the ways to make sure my equipment was going to work. But So, Dan, thanks so much for being on episode 14 of the Deeply Devoted podcast. For all of you that are listening, would invite you to, again, reach out and give me some ideas for the new year about topics that we should talk about. Maybe some people that you want to help me kind of politely and gently twist their arms to be on the podcast. Judy Emery, I'm talking about you.
Come on, Judy.
Linda Shutter, I'm talking about you. And others, it would just be fun to hear your story and hear about your ministry. But that's going to do it for this episode, and we'll be back next Tuesday with another one. Thanks for listening.